you push over that one just a bit?
You're good there.
Yeah, you're perfect.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Charnel Hearing, the Majority Leader in the Virginia House of Delegates. I'd like to welcome everybody to my home in Alexandria City. We have with us the Interstate Caucuses of Black Legislators and the Texas Legislature Democrats. I want to especially welcome the Virginia Black Caucus Chair, Delegate Lamont Bagby, Delegate Darrell Barnes, the Chair of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland, and Representative Nicole Collier, Chair of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus. Today, we are standing before the Kate Waller Barrett Library. Nearly 82 years ago, in 1939, a 26-year-old attorney, Samuel Tucker, with 4 other black men, entered the library and requested a library card individually. As each individually was denied, the person took a book and sat down and read. They were all arrested, and that is typically known as the first sit-down demonstration in this nation's history. It is important that we are here today, and it is justice that we are here, because those 4 men all sat down so we could today stand up. Unfortunately, in the South and across this nation, Jim Crow laws on voting are rearing its ugly head. Restricting the sacred franchise of the vote from Americans is unjust, unconstitutional, and will not be tolerated. They are an affront to the concept of democracy and the freedom that so many like to talk about, but refuse to respect. I am proud of the work that we have done in Virginia to expand access to the ballot from no excuse absentee voting, making Election Day a holiday, making drop boxes available for voters, and the Voting Rights Act that was introduced by 2 legislators who we will hear from later. And we are on the way of extending voting rights to those who have been convicted of a felony and have paid their debt to society. Virginia has moved from the 49th, ranked 49th in the nation for voting, to number 12. We, all of us, stand in solidarity with our Texas brothers and sisters and want to help them fight against restrictive proposals. We know that when democracy thrives, our economy thrives, our schools thrive, and most importantly, our children thrive. This is a time for those who believe in the promise of our nation to stand up to voting restrictions. With that, it is my honor to introduce Senator Jennifer McClellan, one of the sponsors of the Virginia Voting Rights Act.
Thank you, Mayor Herring, and thank you all for being here this afternoon. It is important that we stand in the shadow of our history, because our history has shaped the road that led us here. As chair of Virginia's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Commission, I am here in the spirit of Dr. King as we all fight for the beloved community that he fought for. As we approach the 1-year anniversary of the death of John Lewis, I'm reminded of his words that he wrote, that democracy is not a state, it is an act that requires each generation to do its part to achieve the beloved community that he and Dr. King fought for. Every one of us here behind this podium can tell a story of the generations before us who fought voter suppression, who fought segregation, who fought discrimination. In my own family, it was my great-grandfather in Alabama in 1902 who had to take a literacy test and find 3 white men to vouch for him to be able to keep the right to vote that he gained during Reconstruction. My grandfather, my father, in Nashville, Tennessee, having to pay poll taxes. My mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother not being able to vote until the federal Voting Rights Act passed. Each one of us can tell a similar story, which is why for each one of us, the right to vote is sacred. In a democracy that is by, of, and for the people, our vote is our power. And this is not the first time when Black people and communities of color have gained political, social, and economic power that we have seen efforts to take that power away by taking away the vote, by putting up lies and propaganda, by putting in place violence and terror. We have seen it, whether it's January 6th or the rash of laws that are being introduced around this country. We are here to say no. In Virginia and Maryland, we are leading the way to proactively protect the rights. We are here with our brothers and sisters in Texas and throughout the rest of the country to say we will not let you roll it back, which is why I was proud to sponsor with Delegate Marcia Price the Voting Rights Act of Virginia, and I'm proud to introduce Delegate Price right now.
Thank you, Senator McClellan, for situating today within our historical context. And as she stated, the current context unfortunately includes Republican attempts to erase the truth of our history while trying to repeat it. But we can't go back. We will not be silent in the face of lies about the 2020 election, the domestic terrorism of January 6th, and the intentional voter suppression that is happening across the nation. Now here in Virginia, as you have heard, we have made historic progress and gains, including the Voting Rights Act of Virginia. But there are 2 things we must realize. One, I'm old enough to remember in 2019 and all of the years previous of the Republican majority that each one of the Black Caucus's members voting elections bills were killed summarily while they ushered in voter suppression and used unconstitutional racial gerrymandering to dilute Black Virginians' votes. I'm also old enough to remember in just 2019 that in 2021, that not one of the Republicans supported the Voting Rights Act of Virginia. And if it had not been for us taking over in 2020, we would be like our brothers and sisters in Texas. Number 2, it was the work of organizers, advocates, voters, and legislators together that got this work done here in Virginia, and we have to fight like hell to protect it, or it will be rolled back with more. You know, sometimes our friends need proof in order to believe that our struggles are real. Well, we have seen the states ban giving food and water to human beings waiting to exercise their right to vote. We have seen emboldening partisan poll watchers to intimidate voters while they're trying to vote. We have seen gerrymandered maps with folks on tape and in writing telling you what they're doing because they need to cheat in order to win again. They told you that they're doing this because of historic Black voter turnout. We have legislators fleeing their own states to fight for justice.
Virginia and Texas are standing unified in this effort to let folks know that the right to vote is a privilege. It's not just a privilege, but it is a right. Just like the Black Caucus stood with the Asian community, just like the Black Caucus stood with the LGBTQ community, just like the Black Caucus stood with the Hispanic community, we are asking them to stand with us today. Because if not, this cycle is going to continue again and again. And on this day, we are more unified than we have ever been in our history. In the year 2021, we will not go backwards. We will continue to move forward. And we are asking all that hear our voices today to stand with us, to unify with us, to let them know in Texas that there is a unified body that is demanding the right to vote. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm State Senator Boris Smile from the state of Texas, one of only 2 black senators in the entire large and diverse state. I'm honored to stand with you all from Maryland and Virginia today. And I'm honored that my colleagues would ask me to close us out. But I'm a senator. The real heroes in Texas are my House members. And I've said that from day one. Had it not been for them, we would not be here right now. So I wrote a speech. But you know what? My younger brother, Ron Reynolds, is going to read the speech. They have been in the fight. The Senate, if any of you are in the Senate, that's the upper chamber. The dignified chamber you're supposed to be in. Whoa. It ain't always dignified chamber in the state of Texas when I'm there. But I would like to take the honor to speak to let somebody who's been working tirelessly, an opportunity to tell you how he feels and how I feel. Say Representative Ron Reynolds, I raised this cat.
Well, when your front runner and your mentor put you on the spot, you have no choice but to step up. I'm Ron Reynolds, and I'm proud to be here united with the members of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, but even more importantly, from our allies in Maryland and Virginia. You know, we all stand on the shoulders of those who paved the way for us. None of us would be here but for those civil rights giants and those ordinary people, men and women whose names aren't in the history books. We know about Fannie Lou Hamer and Dorothy Height and Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King, but there were so many nameless people that sacrificed for the precious fundamental rights that we have today, the right to vote. And they had to overcome Jim Crow laws, not just poll taxes and literacy tests, but voter suppression attempts where you would risk being lynched, knowing that a cross will be burned in your yard. If you had a business, that they would shut down your business. But they risked all of that so that they could end Jim Crow laws that disenfranchise black folks. Even after the Emancipation Proclamation, even after the passage of the 15th Amendment allowing blacks to vote, blacks couldn't vote until we made good and necessary trouble, and we passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It is befitting that we're here because it was the Texas president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who signed that bill into law in August of 1965. And guess what? It's shameful that in 2021, where we're supposed to be living in a post-racial America, that we are revisiting the precious fundamental right to vote, the bedrock of our country. And it is shameful that our Republican colleagues are advancing the big lie of Donald Trump that there was massive voter fraud, knowing good, and I'm a kids close your eyes, good and damn well that there was no voter fraud. They know that our elections were safe and sound and we lost legitimately because black and brown people turn out in record numbers. And that is the reason why we're seeing this voter suppression law, because they want to suppress our vote. They want to take us back to a dark day in our country where we had Jim Crow laws. So this is Jim Crow 2.0. This is Jim Crow reinvention. This is Jim Crow where they're empowering partisan poll robbers. So those same people who stormed the nation's capital on January 6th, they want to empower them, the Proud Boys and others, to come and intimidate people to suppress them from voting. They're going to show up in black and brown communities. They're not going to show up in Anglo communities. They're coming in our communities to intimidate our people from voting. That is why we're standing on the right side of history. We're standing on the shoulders of those who paved the way on the nearly 1-year anniversary of John Lewis's death. It is sad that we're not celebrating his life, but we're celebrating the fact that we're all together in uniformity, standing on the right side of history against racial suppression and Jim Crow laws. So we're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to speak truth to power, and we're going to take this message to the United States Senate, where we know that the power is in their hands. The House has already done their part. They've already passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act, and now it's time for the United States Senate. We can't guarantee that after the midterms, we're going to have a Democrat majority in the Senate. We don't know if we're going to have a Democrat majority in the House, but we know for sure that if we don't pass these laws, there's a great probability that we won't. Because the same people that voted for Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema are the same people that are going to be disenfranchised in West Virginia, in Arizona, in Texas, and all over the United States of America. And that's why we're making an appeal to them today to pass these laws. So thank you so much, Virginia and Maryland, for standing with us. And so we want you to know, Senator Miles, I'm gonna. Which one? Okay. Because I was about to bring my chair. Okay. So this is good to know. This is good to know. Our Texas Attorney General has a history of going after minorities. And one particular case that I want to highlight is Herbert Rogers. If you all don't know about him, he is being prosecuted, maliciously prosecuted by our Attorney General for an honest mistake. The arrest came the day before the legislature convened, and the charges were filed in Montgomery County, a county with a history of racial discrimination. It's almost the home of the Klan in Texas. He waited for 6 hours to vote at my alma mater at Texas Southern University in Houston to vote, and gave CNN, Ms. Bash, an interview. His bail was set at $100,000. $100,000. Some alleged murderers get less. The Bail Project and National Charitable Bail Organization bailed him out. In 1995, Mr. Rogers was arrested and sentenced to 25 years in prison for burglary and intent to commit theft. He was paroled in 2004, and his parole was set to end June 13, 2020. In 2007, Governor Perry vetoed a bill, House Bill 770, by our own Chairman Harold Dutton, which Brian Hughes voted for, Senator Hughes, which would have required TDCJ to inform parolees of their limited rights. And we want you to know that we are, it's like a Willie Horton. They're using him to put a black face on voter fraud, and that is disingenuous. So with that, it's my honor to bring up the chair of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, the Honorable Nicole Collier from Fort Worth.
Thank you. You just heard from our Vice Chair, Representative Ron Reynolds, and we follow protocol in Texas, and so I want to make sure that I acknowledge those who invited us. Thank you so much to the Chair Bagby and Chair Barnes, Leader. Thank you so much for having us here, and want to thank our legislative counterparts in Virginia and Maryland for standing with us. I do want to take a moment to introduce and just tell you the names of those that are standing with us from Texas. The Texas Legislative Black Caucus is a bicameral, bipartisan caucus. And so I'm joined with my colleagues from the Texas Legislature, Representative Alma Allen, Representative Greta Flowers, Representative Kathy Crockett. They all deserve applause. Representative Yvonne Davis. We'll hold it to the end. Representative Joe Deschantel, Representative Harold Dutton, Representative Barbara Gerben Hawkins, Representative Jarvis Johnson, Representative Ron Reynolds, which you heard from, Representative Tony Rose, Representative Sean Ferry, and our dean, the longest-serving Democratic member of the Texas Legislature, Representative Symphonia Thompson. Also joining us, and Representative Carl Sherman, I thought I said that. Okay, also Carl Sherman, my desk mate. Also joining us is Representative, our friends from Mexican American Legislative Caucus, Representative Richard Raymond and Representative Ray Lopez. Our senators here with us today, we heard from Senator Boris Miles, and then we also have Senator Beverly Powell and Senator Sarah Eckhart. Okay, great. All right. So, it's befitting that we are here on this day, in this place, at this time. The symbolism that occurred here at this very place is not lost on us. Rather, what occurred at this library on August 21st, 1939, when 5 African American men were denied access to the very services that their tax dollars cover, reminds us of the quest we are on today. But with a lot of courage and a little bit of defiance, they were able to have change. It's unfortunate that while more than 80 years have passed since the courageous men took a stand, that we are still seeking equal access to services and rights today. The Voting Rights Act was passed on August 6, 1965, and signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson of Texas. And Congress is set to recess on August 6th of 2021. Let me tell you why we broke form. Texas has the most restrictive voting laws in the nation already. The most restrictive. And when you attempt to add additional provisions and red tape on top of that, what you're doing is rolling back progress. And so, we saw the writing on the wall. There were no more discussions. There was no more progress to be had. The conversations had stalled. We all know it's not right to negotiate against yourselves. We won't do that. We will not negotiate against ourselves. It makes no sense because we believe in our democracy and the protected right to vote. However, the elections aren't free when you can be criminalized for making simple mistakes. The elections aren't even fair when you're required to jump through a bunch of hoops and complete a lot of red tape just to vote by mail. And elections aren't fair when partisan poll watchers have superior rights over those who are voting. The elections are supposed to be fair and free. But instead of giving thoughtful consideration to the amendments that our members filed, they were ignored. They were denied. And they were declined. So, we did what our ancestors would have done. With courage and a little bit of defiance, we broke form. Now we have brought the force of Texas here to Washington. We want to give the Capitol a little bit of courage and ask them to be a little bit defiant and do what's right to keep moving America forward so that all of us, all of our voices will continue to be heard. We want to keep developing the relationships, keep the conversation going, and we want to help our federal counterparts in any way possible to help them help all of us. Now with that, I want to introduce to you our mentor, our leader, the distinguishable. This woman has more tenacity and more courage in her little finger than any one of us could have. She has been leading the way for more than 40 years in Texas. She won't back down. She won't back up. She won't back out. So I want to introduce you to our very own, the illustrious Synchronia Thompson. Dean.
I want to thank all our guests who are so gracious to invite us here today and to stand with us. And I wish we were talking about climate change and doing something about it. Because my constituents are baking in Texas. And we are concerned about the power grid and the blackouts that they're going to have to endure this summer and be hotter than what it is really doing outside. But there is a urgency here That's the reason why we're here in the nation's capital. And that urgency happens to revolve around the fact that we don't want our constituents' rights, voting rights, stripped away from them. If we can find ways to preserve the voting rights of persons who sit in outer space and give them the opportunity to cast a ballot in outer space, we ought to be able to be smart enough to resolve the issues if there are issues, to preserve the rights of our constituents to be able to cast their votes, and to cast their votes and participate in democracy without fear, without intimidation, and without arrest. And that's why we're here today. We refuse to be a hostage, to remain a hostage within the state of Texas. And I know that there are search warrants out for us, and I'm ready to be arrested. What do you do to a slave if you don't do nothing but arrest them when they flee? We fled Texas. If they want to arrest me, go ahead. I'm ready to be arrested. Because I spent almost 24 hours listening to bills, the voters' rights bills. And to me, that was very, very intimidating to have to sit there and watch people come and beg, watch the disabled come and beg, watch the ordinary citizens come to beg, just for an opportunity to be able to participate in their democracy, only to get ignored at the end of the line when we voted along partisan lines. So we are being watched. Eyes of Texas are upon us. We're being watched. I know we are. But let me just tell you, I want to make sure that my constituents have a say in the democracy. If we can go to Iraq and American soldiers, black, brown, white, and all, can spill their blood on that country to give those people the right to vote in their democracy, and they come home to America and they're denied the right to vote, what's that say about us? I used to think about when I looked at my grandmother who worked for $2 a week, and she would say pennies and nickels. She couldn't afford to say quarters, not from $2 a week when she had her whole earning that she had to pay for her transportation back and forth to work, by a poll tax. And because she was black, she could only vote in the general election because the primaries was white only. And it was not until way almost in the early 60s until we got a right to do that. And just think about that. Do you think that polling place was closed? No. The transportation was not accessible as it is today for her. She had to go the long ways to cast her vote. And many times miss a vote because of the distance of where the polling places were. And when I think about how we had to come a long ways and watch signs that says no dogs, no Negroes, no Mexicans. When dogs was leaked on our people, when they were beaten, they were bombed, when they were killed, and all of the things that we had to endure. Have we done enough? Have we paid the price enough? What is going to take for us to be able to be Americans in this country? I am an American and I want to vote because somebody is written upon my rights and the rights of my constitution. And I'll stay in the fight here today, but I'll stand in the fight for it. Until I can't fight no more. Because I'm tired of people picking on us for no reason. We are Americans. And we are proud Americans. And we deserve the same rights and respect and the same consideration that everybody has. And I'm going to fight until we get it. I'm not going to be a hostage. If they want to arrest me, bring it on. Bring it on.
Again, thank you everyone for coming. Almost want to just end it there. But, you know, I do a lot of work with my brother from Maryland, Chairman Barrett. And I think we invited our friends from Texas here for self-agreement. Whenever I was home from college and I didn't check in with my grandmother, I was in trouble because she needed to lay eyes on me. And so we just invited our friends from Texas here just so we could lay eyes on them, just so we could hug them, break bread, worship with them, tell you we appreciate what you're doing, we
love you, and we're right there with you. On each side, in the front, in the back, wherever you need us to be, we're there. With that, we'll take just a couple questions and get our good legislators and members of the media out of this heat.
Well, thank you for that question. We knew going into this that there's that possibility for our leadership with the members who have been here and experienced it. We knew that they could file even more harmful legislation and make these bills worse. But we knew that going in, but we knew it was at stake. We knew that if we don't take a stand, they're just going to run over us. And so if we don't use our voice, we've lost. So you've got to try. So what we intend to do and continue to do is to use our voice, share our story, meet other federal legislators, let them know what is going on in Texas and across the country, Georgia, Florida, other states, where they're also seeing these concerted efforts to reduce access to voting. So we're going to continue the conversation, build relationships, and keep the message going forward and pursuing fair and free elections for all.
Is there a timeline the speaker is chartered to plane or Texas reporters are wondering, are there plans to get on?
You know, that's very, very wasteful to charter an empty plane to come to Washington, D.C. to get people who are not going to go back with you. So that was just for showmanship, absolutely. It's a way for them to try to flex when they haven't even started lifting weights. Well, you know what? We got to get to the policy first. Let's focus on the policy. The policy is ensuring access to the ballot box, protecting and preserving your right to vote. Let's start there first, and then we'll talk about what the next steps are.
All right, thank you, everybody. Oh, boy, one more.
I was just wondering, Texas legislators, are you worried at all about this dragging out for the next couple of weeks? Voters getting concerned?
One thing that, okay, listen. Black people are strong. We're resilient. We've been through struggles. So this is not new to us. This is not our first dance at this party. This is how we live. So this is not our first rodeo, as we say in Texas. So we're prepared to stay and fight and move the needle forward and really work with anyone who's willing to preserve that right.
Would you stay class if there's another such
We look at what's right in front of us. Right in front of us is now. Thank you so much.
Are you guys meeting with any members on the Hill?
The answer is yes.
Say who?
I know. Oh my gosh. 2019.
I forgot. Kind of missed that pandemic.
I know.
At least it's in the shade.
The guy who spoke, his son goes to Mike.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
He's got the guy from Maryland, so it's gotta go.